Palworld is back in the news for something that a lot of people have been surprisingly hoping for, and that is a lawsuit against them by Nintendo. And while there are some people very excited about this, for today's Scribble Thought, I want to talk about why this sets a very bad standard and gets at one of the more older rules about what it means to trademark and copyright certain aspects of game design. When Palworld came out, we did a critical thought talking about how the game does go beyond just being a Pokemon with guns. But that didn't stop everyone and anyone for going after the developers. There were calls that they were, stealing images or models from Nintendo, that the whole game is just wrong and evil and all that. And a lot of people, again, were counting the minutes for a Nintendo lawsuit. So when it happened about a week or so ago, at the time of when this video should go up, a lot of people immediately jumped at it and said, oh, it's Nintendo suing because the game is just like Pokemon, or they're using characters like Pokemon. But the details of the lawsuit are far more insidious than that. Nintendo is saying that they have the patent for the game mechanics of capturing creatures in the field. You go out, you fight something, you throw some kind of device to capture them, probability, blah, 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 and then the creature is yours and now they're on your team. And this sets a very dangerous standard. It's one that I am not a big fan of. And whether you love or hate Palworld or Nintendo is kind of besides the point for this matter. But for the longest time, it was up to a lot of people, including myself, were under the assumption that you cannot trademark or patent individual game mechanics and systems. You can trademark, of course, the brand around that. The different characters, the iconography, symbology, anything that creates that brand. So that, again, if you're making an ARPG, and if you want to have, health and mana on each individual side, that's fine. If you use the exact same color and design cues of a Diablo game, that's a different story. But one of the things that this lawsuit kind of highlights, and something that has been happening very subtly over the past decade and beyond, are developers who are patenting actual systems when it comes to their games. Not anything that can be tied directly to a brand, mind you, but the actual individual elements that make up that specific mechanic or that specific system. An age-old example of this is from Namco, who patented the whole idea of having a mini game that you could play while the game is loading. There's, of course, the example of Activision with their kind of monetization-focused matchmaking that they patented, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, that came out during Call of Duty. Speaking of that, there's also the entire notion of the Nemesis system from Warner Brothers with, of course, Shadows of War and Shadows of Mordor, which was a really great system. It was used to fantastic effect in XCOM 2. But then it was patented by the developers or by the studio, and now no one can use it. And this, to me, is a very strange and very bad idea for the game industry. And while there's a lot of people who are excited and jumping for joy at Nintendo going after Palworld, let's not forget, of course, what this lawsuit is actually getting at. That Nintendo has the patent for any kind of creature collector mechanic in their games, which, in a strange sense, is not even the original example of this, as Shin Megami Tensei came out a few years prior. Now, again, from a legal standpoint, Shin Megami Tensei did not focus on you capturing a monster using some kind of device. But this sets a very dangerous standard. It's one that I think a lot more people should be pushing back on. Because how many indie games have we played that have used a system where you fight a creature in the field, get their health down low enough, and then throw some kind of capturing device to get them? And again, this could be extrapolated out to other games as well. Anything that involves, again, this kind of creature collector formula. Now, some of you may say, well, this is just a very extreme circumstance. Nintendo will never use this ever again. But again, it's kind of hard to think about along those lines. And as I said a few minutes ago, this kind of blows back, or it destroys the argument that I was saying earlier about how you cannot trademark or copyright individual mechanics or systems, because apparently you can, at least in Japan. And while this will be more on the shorter side for a critical thought this week, this is not good news for everyone involved. It sets Nintendo or any kind of veteran developer or studio who have been around long enough to set these kinds of things on their own to basically have almost like a cachet of trademark landmines for developers to walk on. Again, I've spoken with people who've worked on preserving and doing stuff with classic or trademark or copyright related stuff like the Pinball Arcade, GOG, and so on. And this is the kind of stuff that creates headaches, and it destroys any notion of game preservation or preservation as a whole, where someone somewhere got a patent or the trademark for one part of a property, and because they're not doing anything with it, any attempts to remaster or preserve it are inherently gone. Now, in this circumstance, and with the likes of the Nemesis system, it raises this idea that if you like a system in a game you want to be inspired by or do something similar with it, that a studio can just say, no, we own that entire concept, even if we don't do anything more with it. I haven't heard any more about a new Shadow of War game. I haven't even heard from anyone making a game with a similar Nemesis system. And now we can't really do anything more with it. And if Nintendo does decide to push their legal muscle, this could set a standard where no one else can make a creature collector game. Because again, you can argue for or against Palworld until the cows come home. But if Nintendo literally owns the patent for the entire system of creature collecting, again, creature collecting in a field using a capturable device, that's going to screw with a lot of developers. And again, it's going to be one of those cases where even students or people will be nervous to use something similar because, what if Nintendo decides, well, I don't like this game or I don't want anything to do with it, unleash the lawyers. So, to kind of wrap things up for this very quick discussion, you should not be able to patent or trademark individual systems. This kind of, I think, gets back at one of the older concepts of game development. Again, when game development was in its infancy, it was very much treated the likes of computers or other kind of product-driven markets, that the individual acts or mechanisms of it could be patented and trademarked. Just like how you can patent or trademark how certain devices work, how certain machines or products can work along those lines. But when we get this far into the weeds or delineate this far down that actual individual mechanics can be trademarked, again, this sets a very bad standard for what it means to create video games. Again, no one is sitting here thinking, well, I'm just going to create a Mario game, or I want to create using all the exact same Pokemon sold on Steam. Again, that's the kind of stuff that a copyright and trademark is meant to protect. But if someone wants to trademark the act of walking really fast and shooting a gun that has no reloading mechanisms or realistic gun physics at all, how many shooters would that completely destroy? And I do wonder if some of the reasons we've avoided this for so long is that everyone has trouble arguing as to who's the first one to make a first-person shooter. That's a very fun discussion. What's the first actual roguelike? What's the first actual roguelite? And a lot of that stuff is just lost to time. But when we talk about stuff from studios that are still going on, like Nintendo, you can certainly trace this stuff back. And more importantly, a lot of the inner workings and behind-the-scenes deal from companies like Nintendo, Microsoft, and so on is not really accessible to the public eye. We all know Nintendo is the company that owns Pokemon. Duh. We didn't know that they own the patent for the entire concept of Pokemon. That's a far different can of worms. And like I said, like I would love for this lawsuit to be thrown out. I don't know what's going to happen, but this could be yet another disastrous turn for 2024. So, with that said, let me know what you think about things down below and what other controversies and disasters can happen in the next about a little less than 3 months before this year is over. Thanks for watching, and see everyone in the next video where will hopefully be not as much doom and gloom as this one. Thanks for watching, and a special thank you to our Patreon supporters. If you enjoyed the video, do the YouTubing stuff, be sure to visit our Discord and Patreon, and you're interested in more in my thoughts on design, check out my game design books.